Hello there and welcome to my video diary for day 24 of the Lexical Lab Summer School 2019 series. All this week I've been teaching on our two language development classes called Language Boost. Today I was with the slightly lower group and yesterday with the slightly higher group. And one of the things I've always loved about teaching general English is the way in which, as a teacher, you end up learning all manner of surprising things about your students and about the world. And the way in which, if you're able to allow things to develop in certain ways, and if as a teacher you're sensitive to directions in which students might wish to take the class, mysterious and wonderful things can happen. And I'll just give you one rather strange example. I should warn you, what I'm about to tell you isn't for people who have weak stomachs. It's not for the squeamish and probably not for children either. So you have been warned. Yesterday, with my advanced level group, we were talking about art and about museums, and we did quite a bit of vocabulary for talking about how students felt about art, what the purpose of art was, what is art in the first place. And we then looked at a bunch of paintings, and the students talked about what they knew about the artists, whether or not they liked the pictures, how they felt about them, etc. And there were some really interesting things. One thing that came up was, as they were looking at the Van Gogh painting, The Starry Night, one of my students said she'd watched a TED talk all about how the painting was a very accurate representation of something I'd never heard of before called turbulence theory, which is part of flow mechanics, which I'd also never heard of. So I went home last night and watched the TED video and learned all about that. But the more surprising thing was looking at a picture of the Mona Lisa. Okay, you might think there's nothing left to say about the Mona Lisa. I'm sure you've all seen it thousands of times. First of all, my students were commenting on the Mona Lisa's rather chubby fingers and how it was more common in those days and more accepted as beautiful for women to have fat fingers. They then started commenting on the Mona Lisa's eyebrows or lack of eyebrows. And at the end, as part of the board work, rephrasing and reformulating things that I'd heard students say, helping them to say things better. We ended up with, written on the board, she looks like she's had her eyebrows shaved and painted back on. And from this, students then asked extra questions. And we had, she looks like she's had her eyebrows trimmed. She looks like she's had her eyebrows plucked. Okay. One of the students then said, "Oh, I saw a guy yesterday on the underground who'd shaved his eyebrows off and then had eyebrows tattooed back on." And I'd never heard of this before. We were chatting. Apparently it's a new thing. Another student then said that she had once seen a guy in Denmark who'd had metal implants, like ball bearings, implanted under the skin all the way down his arms. So he had these kind of metal balls sticking out of his arms under the skin. Another student then said, "Oh, that's just reminded me. I read somewhere that sometimes prisoners in Russian prisons take little ball bearings, little metal balls, and insert them into their penises." After checking that we'd understood this, there was much disgust and horror and also amusement as to how she knew this, and then a fair bit of discussion as to why somebody might do this. Is it because they're bored? Is it because maybe it makes them more memorable for any partner that they happen to sleep with? Or, the most depressing theory, is it because it makes it painful for any partner that they may happen to sleep with? Obviously, I didn't go into a class talking about art and museums expecting to find myself talking about this kind of subject or expecting to be teaching any language connected to it. But there you go. That's the beauty and the wonder of teaching.